Sam is and Bethany and the kids are traveling, I think, for the next couple of weeks. So let's keep them in our prayers. But they're traveling, and Sam asked me to fill in for him. So we will be picking up in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. And I guess just by way of review, we're into the section on Jesus, what is termed Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is going over several different topics with the audience. It's almost like bullet points that he's going through, talking about different things. We talked about murder, adultery, divorce. And we're getting to the point on oaths, and one of the points that Sam made, and I want to kind of reiterate that as we begin this morning. It does seem like Jesus is talking about individual topics here, but I think there is a main theme about what Jesus is really wanting people to do is be righteous, to be righteous, a righteous people, and live their life in a way that is according to God's will, and Jesus is giving a teaching on that. So as he's going over these different topics, there's also, we need to look for that underlying theme of really what Jesus is talking about is our character as Christians. We should seek to be a righteous person. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started in verse. We'll read through verses 33 through 37 to begin with. It says, "And again you have heard that it was said in those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no, no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one." So Jesus moves to the subject of oaths and swearing by things, and really, it to me, this is he's trying to talk to the people about when you make a commitment or you make a promise. I think that's what he's talking about, and he refers to, you have heard it said to those of old, and different translations refer to it in a different way, but I think what he's referring back to is in the Old Testament, in the old days, Moses taught upon people taking oaths and making promises, and it was kind of I think it's one of those things where the people at that time really took it to an extreme when they were trying to express how they would make a commitment and follow through on that commitment. And they really put a lot of emphasis on it. Let's turn over to Leviticus. We'll look at a couple of verses in the Old Testament. Leviticus chapter 5. And I guess just to get the point of what is being written about here, we'll read verses 1 through 4. "If a person sins in hearing the utterance of an oath and is a witness, whether he has seen or known of the matter, if he does not tell it, he bears guilt. Or if a person touches any unclean thing, where it is the carcass of an unclean thing, or unclean beast, or the carcass of an unclean livestock, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing, and it is hidden from him, and he also shall be unclean and guilty. Or if he touches human uncleanness, whatever sort of uncleanness it is, with which a man may be defiled, and it is hidden from him, then when he realizes it, then he shall be guilty." And verse 4 is the verse I wanted to concentrate on. "Or if a person swears, speaking thoughtlessly with his lips, to do evil or to do good, whatever it is that a man may pronounce by an oath, and it is hidden from him, when he realizes it, then he shall be guilty in any of these matters. And so Moses is given direction on how we should conduct ourselves, and especially, it's one of these things, I think it's very important where it says thoughtlessly. We as Christians, when we are making commitments, we need to take those commitments seriously. We need to understand what we are promising. I use the word promise, what we are promising to do, and fulfill those promises. Be prepared to fulfill those promises. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the lesson about understanding the commitment we're making when we make a commitment, when we make a promise like that. And then Numbers 30. In verse 2, Numbers 30 and verse 2. If a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all the proceeds out of his. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. And again, I think what the thought was here is be prepared to fulfill your commitments. And, as Moses was teaching back in especially in the time of the Exodus and when the law was first given and as far as the Old Testament goes, God has given them directions on how they should act. Now, I think, and I'll open this up for comments, in the Old Testament, you see a lot of this taking a vow or taking an oath and swearing, when they would take the oath, they would swear by something. And I think that's what you see back in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus telling the people, don't swear by heaven. That's out of your control. You had nothing to do with heaven. You didn't create heaven. God created heaven. Or by the earth, and same thing. You see, you can't swear by the earth. You have nothing to do with creating the earth. It has nothing to do with your promise. And I think what happened in the older times, people would swear by things that were permanent and people knew were in place to show that their vow was committed, that had the same kind of commitment as that permanent object or fixture or whatever. So any thoughts or comments on that, Jeff?
Those are kind of fun things that we do. It's kind of parallel to earnest money or even a down payment. It's to show how serious you are about making the other monthly payments. That's what we do on loans and things like that. And so an oath is to call upon something that is so deeply valuable that it's so important to us that we would sooner we would sooner destroy this as to break our vow, our promise. So, but we're not consistent with this. Like you said, the heaven doesn't belong to us, earth doesn't belong to us. It is silly for me to swear by something that doesn't belong to me. I don't have a right to do that. I can't say, okay, if I don't pay this loan, then you can have Buddy's house. That's not the way it works, So when we offer something that belongs to God against the promise that we have made, especially as fickle as people tend to be, it's an evil. It's a thing that's evil.
Yeah.
It's like I'm stealing destroy my mother's grave if I don't keep, I don't know what that means. It doesn't make sense. So this is why God says, look, just say yes and no. It's okay to make a promise, but keep your promises. There's an interesting passage here in Ecclesiastes 5. He says in verse 4, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. That's a very powerful passage. Now, I want to ask this question, and this is as good a time as any to ask it for the class to consider. Is it better for us to go through life and never make any promises, never make any vows to God? Is that better? Or should we just be careful to keep the vows we make? Now, I understand that, Solomon answered our question in a sense. But that doesn't mean that we need to say, well, I'll just never make a promise to God.
Yeah.
And that way I'll never break a promise to God. The problem with that is that we don't challenge ourselves to do better. And we don't grow like we should grow. We need to challenge ourselves in the Lord. And when we make a promise to God, that needs to mean everything to us. That we want to keep that promise no matter what. I think of, going to worship. I think of taking this just in general. I'm going to care for my children. I'm going to be a good husband to my wife. We make these promises to God. I mean, when you marry your wife, you made a vow, and God witnessed that vow, and that vow was made in front of God and to everybody. So it's better that we make vows, but be careful of the vows that you make, and be sure you keep what you make.
Yeah, I think it goes even beyond a promise to God. I think what Jesus is teaching here is if we make a promise to anybody, it's our character, I get back to the point, it's our righteousness that Jesus is wanting us to understand and improve and be part of our character. That when we say something, we mean it and we do it. And there's a saying out there back in my corporate days. I had a manager position, and people in the head office were calling me all the time. If we had an engine that was broke down or something like that, when's it gonna be back up? I didn't, I'm taking a educated guess, but and my philosophy was always under promise but over deliver. Work hard at it and give them your best estimate, but then make sure that you're going to be able to fulfill what you say, because there's nothing worse in my job that I had is, well, the engine will be back up online in 2 hours, and it's 8 hours later before it comes back online. Well, that was not good at all. And I think that is something, I'm not saying that we should set our bar low. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying be realistic about what promises you make and be prepared to complete those promises when you said you would. And I think it's something that people should recognize. Maybe people should know that when we say something, they're confident that we're going to complete what we say. Jeff?
People understand, Joni, and God does too, that sometimes there are things that keep us from doing what we want to do. I mentioned about rearing your children, being a good husband to your wife. God knows we're not going to be perfect in these things, but we need to make an earnest effort and give our best. There's no story about two men that went, the story was two men who went coon hunting on Wednesday night. And one fellow said, while he's out, he says, I feel bad, that the saints are meeting at Bible class, at the Bible study, and I'm not there. And the fellow said, well, I couldn't have gone anyway, my wife is sick. Of course, the point I'm making is that sometimes we'll grab any excuse we can to get out of doing what we don't want to do. And sometimes we make a promise. And when we make the promise, then when it comes time to pay our promise, things have changed and our mood has changed, and we don't want to do it. Keep your promises. Okay, and if the person is a scoundrel, and he wasn't a scoundrel when you made the promise, but he's a scoundrel now, keep your promise. And you may have some other things you can talk to him about, but you need to keep your promise. Because you made that promise, God heard that promise, and this is what Jesus is getting at here. You shouldn't need the gold of the temple. You know, this is something that kind of revealed the heart of these people. They didn't swear on the altar. They swore on the gold of the altar, because all they really cared about was money. And as I'm making this oath to you, and I swear by the gold of the temple, I'm translating a value that I have, assuming that you have the same value. The world works that way. The culture loves gold, it loves
It understands that that's,
it understands those things. But we need to have, we just need to eliminate all of that.
Yeah.
It complicates everything, it muddies the water, and it keeps us from being a truly righteous person and have a righteous reputation. Remember, we wear God's name, we wear the name of Jesus Christ, and so what we do reflects on Him.
I think it's getting back to the point Jeff was making about swearing to the gold of the temple. Jesus really was wanting to make sure that the audience understood his point about not having to swear upon anything, just letting your word be your standard. You know, and it's you know, he uses heaven, earth, Jerusalem, you know, things that all the audience understood. And it's kind of humorous, the last one he makes. He said, don't even swear by the hair on your head, because you can't control that. You can't even control that. Whether it's white or black or gone, you know. You can't control that. All you have is your word. You know, don't swear. You don't have to swear by anything. Your word is your word. Let your yes be yes and your no, your no, no. So I got kind of chuckled up when I was studying this, you know, thinking about, you know, Jesus' point here. Any other thoughts on, I guess, as far as these verses go, as far as swearing by something and making sure we understand that Jesus is teaching that our word is what is important. Our righteousness and people understanding that we will do what we say. One point I wanted to make as we were going through here, and I look back at the other points that Jesus has talked about in his sermon, and really, you know, this is kind of the beginning of the sermon. We're still in the early stages of his lesson, but I don't know if you notice it, but in each one of these topics, Jesus says the phrase, you know, it says something like what we see here: you have heard or you have read, but I say. And you think about this is early in Jesus' ministry, and in each one of these points, but I say. And I think that's why if you turn over to chapter 7, where he ends his lesson, verses 28 and 29. And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teachings, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. I think Jesus really was showing here that what I'm telling you the truth. I'm coming from God, and I have his authority to speak these things. And, you know, that was probably very profound. They had never heard anything like this. Nobody had taught like this. And so I think that's really why this lesson and at this time really had an impact on the people. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, Arnold?
new light on what his thoughts were on these things. And they just seemed like they weren't quite ready. for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
Because they were so used to being in tune with the Old Testament.
Guided by the, and I think, it really, Jesus is clarifying it in a way that there's no way to misunderstand what he's saying here, and really getting to the heart of the matter. And I'm going to go back and use that word, right. If you want to be righteous, then this is the way. This is what was meant by what you were reading. So, any other thoughts? I just really, in if you remember in Sam's introduction, this is really early in Jesus' ministry, and this is really one of the first times people have assembled to hear and listen to what Jesus has to say. He was not debating with the scribes or Pharisees. He wasn't at the temple. This was a gathering of people that wanted to hear what Jesus had to say. So I think Jesus making those statements, but I say, really shows he is telling people he has the authority of God for what he is doing, what he is saying. Any other thoughts?
Well, one thing, you can see here when they get to one section to another, you always see the word teaching. And this is what he was basically doing. That's why they, I guess, came to the conclusion how he taught, as if, he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, it was definitely a different technique. It was a different way of being taught than they had been taught before. So you can see why they were astonished. It had an impact on the people with this lesson. And then I guess kind of get back over here. So Jesus is telling the people, when it comes to these oaths and vows and promises, and when you're dealing with other people, let your yes be yes and your no, no, for whatever is more than this is from the evil one. And so Jeff touched on it in his comments at the first of the class, but, we really need to think about when we are making a promise, a commitment of, are we going to be able to fulfill this thing? And Jesus said in here, let your yes be yes and your no, no. So there's times when we're going to need to say no, and it's not going to be a popular decision to make. There are things out there, and my thoughts were, if I have peer pressure of some type, if somebody's trying to convince me to do something that I'm uncomfortable with, when I say no, I mean no, and we need to be prepared, and that takes a little bit of forethought on our part. There's a lot of things that I guess my thought is, if you're surprised by something and you've got to make a decision on the spot, a lot of times, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as me, let me put it that way, as far as me, I don't like to make rash decisions like that, because I may not make the right. I need time to think about it a little bit. I need time to think about it. And I'll use the example. I've used this example before, but when my daughter was coming up, I told her, like things like bad habits, smoking, things like that. Make your mind up. What if somebody offers you something like that? Don't have to make the decision on the spot. Let the decision already be made, and your no is no. And people will respect that. Even some of the bad actors out there that are trying to convince you to, come along with us, will respect that. And sooner or later, it'll be to where they don't tempt you with those kind of processes. Jeff?
They may not like it, but they will respect it.
They will respect it. That's right. That's right. But I guess to me, when Jesus is saying, let your yes be yes and your no, no, that means there's a process that you have to go through, a thought process, and be prepared to commit to that answer. So don't answer rashly, I guess is the thing. Jeff, do you have something? Oh, okay. Any thoughts on that? All right, so that's all I had prepared on this section. Anything else we need to discuss? All right, let's move on into verse 38. Let's see. So we got 15 minutes. All right. Verse 38 is in my, how they have the headings in the Bible, it talks about retaliation. Verse 38, we'll read verses 38 through 42. You have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. So this is a difficult passage for us. And when it talks about, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. There was principles in the Old Testament where this was applied, and I think as a society, we kind of look for what we call this justice. Is what we call it, justice. But you see this in all types of societies and governments and laws that are out there, and even I guess in our society today, we look at it more as financial. We instead of an eye for an eye, we look at it as an eye for money. You see people, how much did you hurt me? And I'm gonna put a financial value on that, and that's what you pay me back. So I mean, but it is a legal thing. It is I think Jesus is teaching here. Don't take the law into your own hands on this. There's an attitude that we as Christians should have, and I don't think it's that we have to coward down. We don't have to yield our what's the word I'm looking for? Our not our statue, but our dignity. We don't have to yield our dignity, but it's an attitude that we have that I'm not going to retaliate. I want justice, but I'm not going to retaliate. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Romans 12, Paul says that we return good for evil. So that kind of adds another layer to what you're saying. This is not saying that we never resist evil. We do. Paul, he insisted upon his rights as a Roman citizen on behalf of the church. There's nothing wrong with a man defending his property. If Jesus talks about if a robber is going to come into a house, if the man knew when he was coming, he'd be ready. What Jesus is acknowledging stand up to protect those things that God has made you stewards of. You're responsible for what's gonna happen to those things. And if you give anything away, then you're not being a proper steward. So there is a balance here. And we have to make a judgment as to how much we give away, how we react in certain circumstances. It does certainly mean that when an evil person rises up against us, we don't return evil for evil. He is acting with evil intent, and we do not fight fire with fire. I believe that's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
I don't think he's just talking about what you do, but it's the mindset as well. So and if the roles were reversed, would you do the same? And that's the question. Jesus said it should not be that way.
Yep. I think, the thought process is what is really important here. It gets back to that righteousness. If you turn over a couple of a page or so to chapter 7, Matthew chapter 7, because there's kind of a teaching along what Jeff is saying here. Jesus says in verse 6 of chapter 7, "Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." So there's when Jesus is talking about giving your tunic, not only give your tunic, but your cloak as well. It's like Jeff's talking about. You think about, is this person intent on doing evil or have bad intentions? And, I kind of equate it to, a lot of times you see people that are really struggling and they're asking for help monetarily, and I'm always concerned: are they really going to use this money for food, or it's like a guy told a drunkard was asking a guy for money one time, and he says, I don't have anything to eat, and the guy says, well, you going to use this money for drinking money, or are you going to use it for food? He said, no, I already got drinking money. I just need some food. You got to think about how is that going to be used, and I think that is the point that's being made here is our attitude is not about being revengeful or being intent on however you treat me, that's how I'm going to treat you. That's not being righteous. Being righteous is thinking that we're going to treat others with respect and with due respect, and treat them with dignity, and we're going to keep our actions in a righteous way. Jeff?
There's also another way for us to recognize how we react in this situation. For instance, if the government persecutes a person, and there are times when Jesus talked about fleeing to another place. Sometimes we look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is not whether I'm going to keep my boat and my things, all the things God has blessed me with. What's the gospel going to do? What about the souls of those who are lost? That's more important than those things. And so sometimes we will accept persecution. In fact, no, we'll be honored by persecution. The disciples counted, they were thankful that they were counted worthy to suffer. And so we will be honored by that. And we'll take the punishment and then get back to preaching and teaching and doing those things that are right. And that happened a lot with Christians in the first century. And somebody could argue that they didn't have a choice. No, they did have a choice. They could have started a rebel movement. They could have started what do they call it when you are subversive and you go in, you begin operations to damage the community and do things. I can't remember the word I'm trying to think of. Anyway, pardon? It's not. Anyway, in war, when you don't have an army, you can field, but you fight against in other ways, covert ways.
Covert, yeah.
Yeah, it's still not the word. It's okay. Don't be mad if I can't But the point is, something like that, yeah, underground, it's the idea, they could have done that. Christians could have started a movement like the Zionists, what was, Zealots, yeah, the Zealots were a group of people, and one of the apostles had been a zealot. I think James was called James the Zealot, or something like that. Anyway, so there was an underground movement then, and Christians could have done that too. They didn't do that because it's more important to keep the focus and the priority on the spiritual thing. And so just, if you're thrown in jail, it's not right. But if that's the way it's gonna be, then just, take the time in jail. John the Baptist spent a lot of time in jail. I'm sure he felt like he's wasting his life away. And, I know we might think in those terms, but there are more important things than trying to fight fire with fire.
Right. And I guess getting back to, that theme, that underlying theme here of act in a righteous way. And I guess just, we got just a couple of minutes here. We'll try to finish up this section. Verses 41 and 42, and whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Evidently, back at this time, if people were to come into the area, they needed an escort maybe, or help in finding their way. If there's someone in need like that, our attitude should be that we go above and beyond to help them out, to do all that I guess is within our power to help them out. A lot of times, you say I have. A lot of times you have close friends or fellow Christians. I could call this guy up at 2:00 in the morning, no matter what. No matter what, he'd come help me. And that's kind of that attitude that I'm talking about here. It's if especially if someone that is deserving of that kind of commitment from ourselves. It says, "Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away." If it's within your power, then you should have that mindset that you're willing to help those around you. That again, we have to be careful and make sure we make wise decisions. We are stewards of what we have, God has given to us, that we do things in a way that is using those the things that we have in a righteous way. So, any other thoughts? Jeff and then Arnold.
Philippians 2 and verse 4 says, "Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others." We need to be interested in others, and I think this is the second mile attitude.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, confession, I've been guilty when I've been asked to do something by somebody, and I think to myself, well, how's that going to impact me? I'm going to miss part of the ball game. I'm going to not get to do something else I was planning to do, and it gets to be a difficult temptation for you to say, well, I can't do that. Well, really, you can do that. You just really don't want to do that. And so we need to be honest. And bottom line is we want to think of ourselves as compassionate and interested in others and wanting to show an interest in others. But there's a price to pay for that. We have to recognize that. And so when it comes time to pay that price, that we need to go that second mile willingly, gladly. Now, I will mention that the reason Jesus mentions this is that one of the laws that Rome had was that the military, if they're doing something, soldiers moving equipment or something like that, they could grab any Jewish man and require him to carry a load for up to a mile.
A mile.
And what Jesus is saying is, no, you need to go 2 miles when you help somebody, when you're required to do this. Now, here you're not really doing a friend a favor. You're helping a soldier from the army that's
Against you.
got you captive, epistles, that even the people in Caesar's house knew that his chains were because of the gospel. In other words, he was not really guilty of anything that he did not belong in jail. This was a religious thing, and everybody knew it. But he himself cooperated. You know, when he went before governors and things like that, he spoke with respect. He did not speak with hatred in his voice. This is really what Jesus is trying to get at, is that we not have hatred or ill will toward other people. That we not be selfish, that we be willing to help others and show love to others.
Arnold?
Yeah, just along the same line, the teaching, again, is about, not everyone should be walking around, with eye knocked out or tooth knocked out. You know, who knows who's bad?
Yeah.
Everybody, tit for tat. And some may believe that, he's a little better than this guy, but who can tell if you run around?
That's right. That's right, yeah. Yeah, I think Jesus is really, it's a contrast here between an eye for an eye thought process and going above and beyond to help somebody. You know, there's a contrast here that he's trying to show us, so. Okay, any other thoughts? We're a little bit over time. All right, we will pick up next week. We'll stay in the same section. We'll pick up with verse 43 next week. Matthew 5, verse 43. All right, thank you.
Took a 4-wheeler